Blocking this deep. Oratory. Same room, same plan. The rooms are. Okay. Okay, what are you gonna be tagging something? No, but I can't like. Oh, really? Is it oh, okay, I thought it was green one from here looks green because it's black and green. Look at my room, it's like. I'm practicing it. Wait, hold on, girl. Yeah. Did the judge seem impressed by your speech?
I don't know what that's supposed to mean.
Like, was he blank faced, frowning, smiling?
No, he just looked at me like I don't know what I said. Gang, I am like so terribly dehydrated right now. It's a little bit of an issue.
Outside there are water people.
I know, but like, dude, I think I've had all of my Oratory. Should be not in this room. No,
What?
I've been in that room.
They've all been in this room.
My own all been. Two have been in this room. Okay, let's go. I'm gonna do it in the path that I keep forgetting. So Jala, so I what are those? And then this.
Hi. Nice how it's going.
What do you have a program?
She's going back.
And you're going second. I'm going fast. Do you have a twin brother? No. Do you have a brother?
I have a brother.
Oh, there's no, there are no twins of the leader. There's no horses someone. That's yours only. Oh yeah. I had one in the physics lab, but I couldn't stop laughing at the Einstein. I don't know what that was.
We have to move this. Wait, are you stand there?
I'm not really.
Yeah, we just have to move this camera. Smile.
Oh yeah, we made that. 500 más me so much. I was like, what number is 500?
Wait, what? It's fine.
500.
Okay.
500. Dos mil 500. Honestly, middle is million, thousand, million, million. That's there. So there's like, what's the word for millionaire? Millonario.
Did they end speaking?
And I'm like looking for it, and I'm looking at her, I'm like, okay, I know where it is. That was in there. ¿Cómo se dice millionaire en español? Como...
I have to give up on my bed again.
Judging all of you guys again?
I'm just gonna see the door open. I'm also gonna bed with you and I'm gonna go here. Oh, the door. I think it's
Do we wait until 6:15 when we're supposed to start, or can we start early if we?
Can we just start over?
We can start early? Is everybody ready to start?
Is this everyone?
Yeah, so, the order here is Alexandra, then Leanne, then Sheila. Right? Alright.
Today, I want to talk to you about assumptions. Most of us make them pretty regularly. Well, assuming is one thing, but judging someone based on an assumption is another thing entirely. When I first moved here, we met this lady who asked my brother, Jonathan, what grade he was going into. When he replied 9th grade, she turned to me and said, oh, so you're going into 7th grade then? Now, Jonathan is about 2 years younger and 6 inches taller than me. Based on what the lady could see, this wasn't an unreasonable assumption. But it really annoyed me to get judged like that. If I get upset about something as minor as that, how would I feel if someone assumed they knew who I am, based on society's common misperceptions of redheads? That's a hard question to answer, but something I was forced to ask myself when I came across the term toxic masculinity. Toxic masculinity, as defined by the Director of Women's and Gender Studies at Custom University, Colleen Clemens, is defined as a narrow and repressive description of manhood. Designating manhood is defined by violence, sex, status, and aggression. Basically, it's the cultural idea of manhood. What most struck me about this definition was how it was both confusing and misleading. It seems that our cultural definition of masculinity is exemplified by toxic behavior. I have a great dad, awesome brothers, and a ton of guy friends who I have amazing relationships with. So I was concerned when I came across this definition because I saw how easily it could be misinterpreted to mean that the very basis of masculine identity is toxic. Don't get me wrong, the issues at the heart of the masculinity debate are very real. According to Statista.com, between 1982 and November 2018, there were 110 mass shootings in the United States. 106 of those were carried out by men, and more than large-scale attacks. Domestic abuse perpetrated by men is a real problem too. But after spending time doing my research and observing the men I know, I believe that the true cause of the problem is that our cultural expectations of what it means to be a man are toxic. The feminist and civil rights movements changed cultural stereotypes through the use of open, honest dialogue to bring awareness to their causes. However, men haven't had the same opportunity. In order for us to be able to define masculinity and get rid of these outdated cultural stereotypes and the double standards we create for men, we must create an updated definition of masculinity. But before we can define masculinity, we must get rid of these cultural expectations that we have, such as the term toxic masculinity. Not too long ago, African Americans were referred to as colored. Today, that term is offensive and rude. In the same way, women were referred to as doll or sugar or honey all the time, even in a professional workplace. While these phrases might still be heard today, they are no longer socially acceptable. On the other hand, it is still socially acceptable to describe men as hunks of meat, or macho. It's ridiculous that in a society where so many efforts have been taken to create language that is updated and respectful, we are still describing men in ways that contribute to the toxicity that we criticize. Now, these advances didn't just come out of thin air. No, such widespread change on a cultural level has only occurred because of the years of hard work and campaigning done by the women and men associated with the feminist and civil rights movements. Unfortunately, these same efforts have not been put forth to change the way that society views masculinity. I still hear phrases like, be a man up, and the slightly more vulgar, grow a pair, all the time. This suggests that we as a society have a problem with men displaying what are culturally perceived as feminine traits. But we can't have it both ways. We can't say that we want our men to exhibit less violence and then turn around and criticize them for showing emotion and vulnerability. So first we must redefine what it means to be a man today. Only then can we have conversations to discuss and replace our outdated cultural perceptions about masculinity. Once we do that though, we have to be willing to see the problems in our world for what they are. For instance, there are far fewer male nurses than female nurses. Often, the situation exists because society traditionally gives the role of nurturer and caregiver to women. One male nursing student said that based on his own experiences, this perceived femininity of nursing could have an effect on the number of men considering this career. Unfortunately, there seems to be a correlation. According to the Kaiser Family Foundation, as of April 2017, only 9% of practicing nurses in the United States were men. This discrimination against men in fields traditionally dominated by women is difficult to accept, especially when you consider all the time and effort that has gone into making women feel comfortable in traditionally male-dominated fields. Take a look at STEM fields, for example. According to the University Times, the largest student newspaper in Ireland, there is nothing like the proactivity seen in trying to bring women to STEM when it comes to men in nursing. Simply put, the cultural expectations that we place on men and the double standards that we create for them are not fair. The only way we are going to see progress is through actively working to change our cultural perceptions about masculinity to benefit men, just as we work to change how we view women and other traditional minorities. When asked what she thought 21st century feminism looks like, Gloria Steinem answered, "It's not for me to define. The message of feminism is that each of us, as female human beings, define ourselves. In order for us to be able to define masculinity, we must revamp our cultural ideals to expectations that are relevant in the 21st century. Then we must build on that foundation to define what it means to be a man today." Like Gloria Steinem said about 21st century feminism, we must define masculinity for ourselves. Changing societal perception is a big, difficult thing to do. But change starts right now, with you and with me. If my friends and family have taught me anything about masculinity, it's that there is more than one way to be a man. We no longer hold women to the same outdated culture stereotypes that we did 50 years ago. Don't we owe it to our men to afford them that same consideration?
I'm just gonna take 20 seconds to write notes and then I'll. All right. Oh, yes. All right. Leanne, you're up.
As I was researching the internet, specifically how to write an interesting introduction to a speech, I thought to myself, perhaps Google is taking the search and integrating it into a profile that they have created of me. Judging by this fact, it seems now that I have become the product of Google, and they are most likely selling this information to other major corporations as I am speaking. So, the old saying, you know yourself better than anyone else, might become obsolete as the internet evolves and obtains more information about us. With abuses of databases such as Cambridge Analytica, using data analysis to manipulate processes such as elections through advertising, some may argue against the internet monitoring the content. Yet, this just might not be as much of a negative concept as it seems at first glance. You may be taken aback by my statement. Of course, we all know the book 1984 by English author George Orwell. In his famous novel, Orwell describes a society in which citizens are under constant surveillance by their government, a world that is to be avoided at all costs, as we all essentially have the need for privacy at different degrees. After all, who would want their every move tracked by their government? Ultimately, this is a dystopian novel, and we should bear in mind its warnings. While the concept of privacy might vary from one person to another, according to Merriam-Webster's Law Dictionary, the definition of privacy is, quote, freedom from unauthorized intrusion. What if intrusion was authorized? Then the question becomes, when should we give up our privacy to the internet? What would it cost us to sacrifice our right to isolation from public scrutiny for maximizing cybersecurity and enhancing healthcare? What if we knew our information was being accumulated? Let's take Google as an example. Google has a service called Google Flu Trends that tracks outbreaks in a region and reports the information to clinics. The service dynamics are based on analyzing search history patterns and synthesizing searches to track the outbreaks. Yuval Noah Harari, author of Homo Deus, a book encapsulating the agenda and future of humanity, mentioned that the service, even with certain limitations, such as not reading private emails of individuals, is capable of knowing when there is an outbreak on the rise roughly 10 days before any other conventional health service. But the key to actually putting this service into use is by implementing our information into databases such as Google. Suppose an epidemic such as cholera on the rise, a disease that the World Health Organization classifies as a global threat. Just think of how many consequences the service can help us avoid with the act of predicting and possibly reversing the rise of such epidemics. Enhancing healthcare, of course, is only one of the few goals we can achieve through using the internet. Unfortunately, in our contemporary world, a child can be just a few clicks away from the risk of being exposed to inappropriate content, cyber stalkers, cyber predators, and many more. Bearing in mind, there is the option of completely isolating a child from the use of technology, but if we look at our school, every student is required to attend school with technological equipment, whether it be a phone or a laptop, as we carry out many functions and assignments using technology on a daily basis. According to Keylogger Review, quote, 82% of sex crimes involving a minor are initiated from social sites. What if databases such as Google could take on the role of a cyber guardian and filter content for the protection of minors on the internet? Would it be worth giving up our privacy on the internet for the protection of minors on the internet from harmful and possibly threatening content? Google Trends is another service that has been effective in collecting data off of searches and providing the public with statistics on a variety of subjects, such as social issues, political issues, cultural issues, and even subjects such as clothing trends. One of the issues that the service discusses is that of gun rights in the United States. The service claims that the issue of gun rights and gun control in the United States has become a major political and cultural matter. In addition, the service also provides the ratio of gun shops to gun control in the United States as of 2019. Considering that this is public data, schools, governments, individuals, and even entire communities can use these statistics We're tackling their social issues, political issues, economic issues, any issues really. Evidently, there are quite a few benefits to having an outside source monitoring the content, but as for our human rights, there have been numerous complaints concerning our human rights and governments, as well as databases monitoring internet activity. The Declaration of Human Rights, established by the United Nations General Assembly, states that we have the right to freedom of expression, opinion, and the right to privacy, along with many more. But nevertheless, with these rights comes responsibility, specifically with what we choose to search and display on the internet. In fact, Google's terms of service claims that, quote, you are responsible for the activity that happens on or through your Google account, and that essentially what you choose to search and display on the internet can be used to modify and filter content tailored to your profile. In essence, Google quite clearly informs us of its policies. So, is it really considered a violation of privacy if one voluntarily displays anything on the internet? If we give consent to databases on the internet, and use these sources for good, maybe it is worth giving up some of our privacy. This is not a science experiment with researchers taking a small group of people and running a controlled experiment. This is the internet, a whole virtual world, harvesting a large number of data points at an elevated level of accuracy. So although giving up our privacy on the internet seems like the last thing we want to do, maybe data collection on the internet might just be our ally in this virtual world that we have created. Keeping in mind our beliefs, such as that every individual is entitled to privacy, as well as recognizing the warnings of novels such as 1984, by giving consent to databases on the internet or acquiring data, we can reach unprecedented heights in the world we know today.
Pin drop silence, pay attention. The information you are to receive, your future depends on it. Stop daydreaming. Imagine living in this box of routine algorithms, definitions to be memorized, a world of mark schemes, and examinations. We've all lived in this box for a large part of our lives. Some of us still do. As we start to think within these boundaries and set parameters, this box stifles our imagination, our creativity. I've been thinking about this for a long time. How come I accept knowledge as it is presented to me and never challenge it like I used to? When writing the speech itself, why was I constantly stuck at a dead end? Was I fearful of how you may receive it? It is in times like these that we doubt whether we all are creative. Maybe creativity belongs only to a select few. Well, Pablo Picasso once said, every child is born an artist. The problem is to remain an artist once you grow up. Was I also losing the artist in me? Are you? As I dug in deeper, Picasso was not the only one to voice my concern. In a NASA study, a set of 1,600 people were tested on their creativity over a 20-year span. The same children at the age of 5 were tested in regular periods at the age of 10, 15, and 25. The study concluded that 98% of 5-year-olds fell in the highly creative range. 30% were in this creative genius category as 10-year-olds, 12% as 15-year-olds, and a staggering 2% as adults. How does our creative spark die off? Where does the artist disappear? And why can't we afford to no longer go this way? That is what I would like to talk to you about today. The message is clear. As children grow up, they seem to grow out of creativity. It should surely not come off as a surprise then that 78% of CEOs cite creativity to be the number one shortage in their companies. So, how does this shortage occur? Well, on the hunt for scientists and innovators, the NASA study confirmed that our education system is responsible for this. Under the current culture of education, students are educated out of their creative capacities. How, you ask? Currently, knowledge retention is still prized over original thinking. Professor David Eagleman asserts that we are still stuck in the rut of the Industrial Revolution. Our curriculum is standardized, the ringing bells mark a change in factory shifts, and students are fed knowledge that most seem to regurgitate in examinations. As a judge in this forensics round, what brings you here to take the time aside and listen to us speak? This may be more than just a competition for you. Perhaps you too believe in the power of creativity. For that, I applaud you. Thank you for your support. Nevertheless, this room, those who encourage original thinking, represents a minority. Rana Dajani, a Jordanian lecturer and university professor, states that current progress, even in the Arab world, is an embarrassing disappointment. Knowledge, information, and theories are presented as indisputable facts, and this creates students who struggle with independent thinking. But what are the implications on our future? A Harvard Business Review article titled The Future of Human Work is Imagination, Creativity, and Strategy confirms that technology is going to replace people with jobs. Few industries, if any, will be untouched. Knowledge workers will not escape. We need to rethink the principles upon which students are educated, because in less than 20 years, standardized tests will have no value. They cultivate these knowledge workers. What differentiates us, even secures us, will be our creativity. At the end of the day, can we have original ideas? Creative jobs have a 9% potential of being overtaken by machines. And because creativity equips us to adapt to new situations as they arise. With the degree of uncertainty facing us, our world is engulfed in a phase of rapid change. From the disastrous effects of climate change to poverty to ever-growing war, we need to approach these complex issues with bold solutions and fresh perspectives. But ultimately, who is going to do that? Quoting educator Sir Ken Robinson, creativity now is as important in education as literacy, and we should treat it with the same status. There is this famous story that I've always found insightful. From school, young Thomas Edison came home to his mother, handing her a letter. Teary-eyed, she read it aloud. Your son is a genius. This school is too small for him. It does not have enough teachers for training him. So please, teach him yourself. After years of nurturing Edison's talent for mechanics and chemical experiments, his mother, Nancy Matthews Eliot, passed away. It was then, when sorting through her things, Edison found an old folded letter. It read, Your son, Thomas Edison, is mentally disturbed. He is hereby expelled from attending school. Thomas Edison was one of the greatest inventors the world had seen. Nancy Matthews Eliot saw her child for the hope he was, and his creative capacity for the richness it had. With that belief, she changed the world. I have faith that our schools can place its belief in our imagination, just how Eliot did, just how you do so today, and just how the revered author J.K. Rowling did so, before her advent of Harry Potter. J.K. Rowling's parents and teachers saw her imaginative genius as an amusing personal quirk that would never pay a mortgage or secure a pension. So, they hoped she would take up a vocational degree instead. Yet, Rowling had a strong belief in the power of imagination and resisted taking the conventional, sought-after road. Little did her parents know that her creativity would cast generations of readers under her spell. To nurture the Rowlings and Edisons of the world, we must excite and awaken the power of imagination in every child. We can do just that. There is wonderful work taking place where teachers are thriving when students are intellectually alive. Mind Drive is only one example where their projects hit news headlines. An alternative education program for troubled youngsters, it attempts to bring back their love for learning. Recently, groups of students created an electric car that runs on social media's tweets and likes. What's interesting to me is these are called alternative education. Because if we did all that, we wouldn't need an alternative, would we? Not every school would look like Mind Drive, and not every school should. With you being the educator, you are the visionary. You have the greatest power to create change, the power to support students to think outside the box. But to think outside the box, we must envision ways to open it first. The road to the future begins in classrooms of today. Let us treat every child for the miracle they are. Let us celebrate the gift of human imagination. In turn, let us open our future to wider possibilities. Because the best way to predict the future is to create it. Thank you.
Great job, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wait, do you know what you're supposed to do now?
I think you're supposed to go back to your emails.
Yeah, I'm so
I
tired.
don't know what the coach's feels. I think because you have people you're saying with you, right? So
Yeah.
I guess you can use.
Guys, do you have specific titles that you want me to write or just the general?
Thinking in
Yes,
boxes.
thinking boxes. Okay,
Mine is in defense of masculinity.
in defense of masculinity. And
The virtual battle.
the virtual battle. Got it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
I would like to really appreciate that you made eye contact. You were a great judge.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Bye. Have a great night.
You too. Yes. Yeah.